them touchdown passes.
Peyton bounces around, throws. The ball will be caught. Julius Thomas, touchdown, Denver.
What is up, guys? On this segment of Beyond the Sport, I'm going to be giving you 5 reasons as to why the Denver Broncos are going to be a playoff caliber team come next season. And just to start it off, to get into it, I'm going to give a little bit of a reminder as to how they finished last season so hot and why that's going to translate to wins next season. Enjoy. After a thrilling finish to the season, finishing 4-1 in their last 5 games under Drew Lock, rookie starter at the time, the team was able to rally around and make the most out of nothing. After having a horrendous start to the season that involved both Joe Flacco going to IR and Brandon Allen getting a chance to start, Denver Bronco quarterback situation was not looking very ideal. That was until the Broncos activated Drew Lock off the IR from earlier in the season. The spark that this franchise has needed for the last 3 years was finally there, as the team was able to finish strong with a 7-9 record, good for second best in the AFC West. This is a team that has always had the talent in the last couple of years, but has underperformed largely in due to the fact that their quarterback play has been so poor. It's been a revolving door of quarterbacks from Trevor Siemian to Paxton Lynch to Brock Osweiler to Case Keenum, and then to Joe Flacco and Brandon Allen. But it looks like they've got themselves a good one in second-round draft pick, Drew Lock, who showed flashes early on as he was able to defeat the Chargers in the home opener for Drew, of course, that is, in Week 13, as he was able to throw for 2 touchdowns. He did have an interception on the day, but he was showing great signs early on. He had that phenomenal connection with Courtland Sutton. I think you can expect to see those two connecting very often next season and in the future. But it was a great start for this team as they were able to get it going under Lock. And it seemed like the quarterback position had a little bit of, swagger to it. Something they hadn't seen with the last 4 or 5 quarterbacks that have gone through Denver in just a 3-year time span since the departure and retirement of Peyton Manning. This is a franchise that has had a resurgence at the position, as they think this may be the one. With that being said, here are 5 reasons why the Denver Broncos are one of the biggest sleeper teams in the NFL and will not only impress and have an above 500 record, but they will make the playoffs in the 2020 and 21 season. Reason number 1, without a doubt, has to be the talent that this roster does possess. This is something that has led to little success, but if you look at the roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball, the side that has won Denver, the games that they have won, and goes back to their Super Bowl 50 victory over the Carolina Panthers, this is a unit that has the talent. Anytime you have guys like Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, guys like Kareem Jackson, Justin Simmons, and acquirements throughout free agency, this is a talented defense that should be able to get the job done, keep Denver in games, and find ways to do just enough as it leaves the offense with not much of a responsibility as far as what Drew Lock has to do as a quarterback. There's definitely a lot of weight off his shoulders. He knows he doesn't have to carry the group. He doesn't have to light up opposing defenses for 40-plus points. This isn't the 2013 Broncos we're watching. This is a new and improved team that I think is going to continue the success as they finished last season very strong on the year, winning 4 of their last 5. I think that this is a group that has the talent on both ends of the ball. The offense still in question, like usual. That hasn't, been pushed under the rug. That's still the number one question going into the season, like it has been over the last couple years. But this is a young, emerging offense with tons of talent to go alongside that defense. And I think that is why the first reason why they will make the postseason next year is because of the talent that they currently possess going into the season. Reason number 2, free agency. This was something that Denver had taken a very cautious approach to. They were a little bit slow early on, dating back to that A.J. Boye trade. They had acquired the Jacksonville Jaguar cornerback for just a 4th rounder, but this was, of course, before the New Year League had begun, which wasn't official until March 18th, so until that time period, that transaction was not official. Until then, of course, after that time period had passed by, Denver wasn't making any moves besides signing Graham Glasgow, which I think was a very underrated signing. As an interior offensive lineman, it's very versatile. He could play center for the team. He could play left guard. He could play right guard, obviously. Dalton Risner has left guard solidified. So it's really going to come down to either the center or right guard position after losing Connor McGovern to the New York Jets. So they're going to have to figure out what they want to do, whether it's maybe putting him at center and Elijah Wilkinson at right guard, something that they kind of used a little bit last season, as there was a lot of guys going in and out, besides really Risner, who was the most steady. Of course, Juwan James was injured last season for the entirety of the season. He only played a couple snaps. That's going to be a big key guy to get back for them as far as the offensive line goes. But as far as free agency goes, the rest of the way, there weren't too many moves being made, and fans were getting a little bit upset, a little bit anxious, especially after star and defensive lineman DJ Reader was off the board after the Broncos were outbid by the Cincinnati Bengals. There were rumors around Twitter that they were very close to signing a deal with Reader, the 25-year-old who had a lot of value as far as interior defensive linemen go, but the Bengals were able to swoop in as they offered a little bit more. In typical John Elway fashion, he didn't want to overpay guys. He likes to make very quiet, solid moves. I think he did a very good job of that, because after that move, it left the fans very upset, but there's no better way to satisfy those same fans than to acquire 5-time Pro Bowler Jarrell Casey for just a 7th-round pick. Of course, this was a situation where Tennessee was trying to relieve themselves of some cap issues, so they weren't trying to get too much in return, but to be able to pull the trigger and find a way to get a Pro Bowler of that caliber in Jarrell Casey, there's no better way to replace a guy like Shelby Harris and potentially Derek Wolfe, who look like they are both going to be leaving Denver at some point in free agency as we wait for those moves to be made. Then they were able to get backup quarterback Jeff Driscoll. This is definitely not one of those moves that get you excited, but you know that they have to get a backup to go under Locke, who is the guy going forward, which is so big for Denver because there's usually so many question marks going into OTAs and training camp. But that's not the case this year. Another move was getting Melvin Gordon from the Chargers right after Chris Harris Jr. had decided to join the Chargers to face the now rival Denver Broncos. The Broncos were able to get a little bit of revenge themselves and sign Melvin Gordon to a 2-year, $16 million deal. Now that is going to be a very dangerous backfield, and I'll get more into that alongside Philip Lindsay and even Royce Freeman for depth purposes. Then you get into Nick Van Nett, acquired the Pittsburgh Steeler, who was on the market and had a little bit of value, a little bit of interest around the league. This is a guy that's going to be behind Fant, who is the tight end of this team. They'll most likely move Hireman to free up some cap. Not too sure how John Elway is going to approach that situation, but I'm sure he has a plan in place. Otherwise, a move like that would not have been made. But that is a solid piece as far as depth purposes go, as there's some very talented tight ends on this roster going into next season. So this is a Denver Broncos team that I think has utilized free agency very well, as they're able to address some very big needs. They also acquired punter from the Lions, as that's something that has also been a position of need. You could say whatever you want about punters and their values, but they got themselves a good one in Sam Martin. This is a guy who has consistently averaged some of the furthest yards per punt around the league. And in that Denver altitude, I expect him to do some good things. And Kobe Wadman was a guy that seemed like it was inevitable. He was going to be replaced at one point or another, and it just happened to be the time for him to be out of Denver. And that was a good move, a very underrated one. And, they're just making sneaky good moves, I believe, because re-signing certain guys onto the team, like Mike Purcell, they tendered him, they tendered Tim Patrick. These are some key guys that could provide depth. Purcell was actually Pro Football Focus's #1 rated run defender, and I think that John Elway is just making the right moves left and right, and this was a free agency that got off to a slow start, but in typical Elway fashion, he was able to make all the right moves, and I think that this team has set themselves up very well for the draft. Reason number 3, the young offensive core that Denver has in place. You look at young quarterback Drew Lock going into his second season, Cortland Sutton, wide receiver, going into his third, Philip Lindsay going into his third as well, and you have Melvin Gordon, just 27 years old, to go in with Philip Lindsay. That is a dynamic duo, and hands down the best running back duo in the league as far as the talent perspective goes. Obviously, you could look at production, you could look at what the Niners have done with their running back core. I'm sure you could find all the numbers that could prove otherwise, but from a talent perspective, these two are special. You put these guys together, Melvin Gordon, top 5 since entering the league in touchdowns. He's one of the best receiving backs in the league. He can make guys miss at the second level. You pair that up with Phillip Lindsay, the Tasmanian Devil, the speed demon himself, and what he has done so far as being the only undrafted player in NFL history to go back-to-back seasons of 1,000-plus rushing yards to start their career. This kid's off to a phenomenal start, and he doesn't look to slow down anytime soon. With Melvin most likely being the starter, being the, per se, bell cow, as I've heard being thrown around there, he's going to get a majority of the carries because he's more built for it. He's a more powerful back who could shoulder the load, and I think that they're going to use Phillip Lindsay at that secondary role, but not by too much. The carries are going to be very similar for the most part, and he's going to be a change of pace back, and I think it's only going to open up options for Phillip. I think the two are going to feed off each other's energy. When one makes a good play, the next one's going to want to go out there and best them. I think there'll be a little bit of a friendly rivalry between the two. I know that Phillip has already reached out to Melvin as far as him being signed, and knowing the guy that Phillip is on and off the field, I'm sure he welcomed him with open arms, and those two are ready to get to work. I definitely know that those two are going to have a huge impact on the run game. Obviously, what they do to solidify that O-line is greatly going to help, but I think that those two are going to take off a lot of the pressure that would typically be on Drew Lock, so that the second-year quarterback can do his thing on his end, hit up number 14, Cortland Sutton, something he showed early signs of. And Tim Patrick is one of those other solid young receivers. They did second-round tender him, so they do have a plan for him going forward. I think that he's a big, strong physical receiver. He has the tools to be good in this league. And you mix that with Deshaun Hamilton. That's a slot receiver that Drew Lock found very often near the end of the season in the 5 games that he did start for the team. And I think that there's just so much young talent. And then you throw in a guy like Noah Fant in there, the rookie tight end, who set a franchise record for receiving yards. He was doing some incredible things. A little bit of a slow start. His hands weren't as solid as you'd like them to be, dropping a couple passes here and there, but he really settled in as far as his season went as it progressed. I think him and Drew Lock have a pretty solid connection. He had a good game against the Texans. He caught that 1 touchdown pass from Drew and made a couple other plays to get them down the field on a consistent basis. This is a team that's loaded with talent, and that's just from the last couple drafts. Elway has done a phenomenal job in building this team from the ground up, and I think that they're only going to continue to improve because of the young talent that they do have, and I think that that's going to take them to the next level. Reason number 4 has to be the healthy Denver Broncos going into the season. There were a lot of injuries throughout last season that kind of derailed the season before it even started, and it starts with Bryce Callahan. That was the big free agency slot cornerback signing, the former Vic Fangio product back with the Chicago Bears. That was a guy that was coming off of career-high numbers at the position when the team signed him for a very favorable $7 million annual deal. He was supposed to be a big piece of that secondary that did not look up to standard from what we had seen in previous seasons because of that injury. He had suffered a foot injury back in training camp, and he was never able to recover and did not see a single snap on the field for the team throughout the regular season. Getting a guy back like that fully rested is going to be key for that secondary and how they could solidify it to go alongside the talent that they already have in place. Then sticking with the defense, you have Bradley Chubb, one of the more elite pass rushers that this league has to offer. In his rookie season alone, he almost broke the all-time record for sacks by a rookie, just falling short. But this guy has all the potential in the world, and it was a very unfortunate occurrence to see him tear his ACL early on last season versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. That was a crucial game for the team where they had just barely let it slip through their fingers by what was a common theme, and that was the field goals that were just too much to handle for this team, and I'll get into that in reason number 5. But this is a group that gets back a guy like that. This is going to help Von Miller tremendously. We saw how excited he was on draft day 2 years ago when they had selected him, and there's a reason for that. Bradley Chubb is legit, and when those two are paired up on opposing sides, that is an absolute nightmare for opposing offensive tackles. Then we're going to switch over to the offensive side of the ball, and we are going to go to Juwan James, which was arguably the biggest free agency signing of the team, definitely the biggest as far as a dollar amount goes. And the right tackle was never able to recover after suffering an early knee injury on just his first couple snaps with the team. at the Oakland Coliseum Week 1 versus the Raiders. And it was a knee injury that continued to prevail throughout the season. He returned only to re-aggravate it, and he just never looked the same. So he was not able to really get any legitimate consistency, get some good reps with the team, and wasn't able to be a part of the team's success late in the season. This is a guy that, when healthy, is one of the top tackles that the league has to offer. That is the big thing with him, though, and that's the fact that, staying healthy hasn't really been his key attribute as a player. That's something that he struggled back with the Dolphins, and I think that's something that if he can find a way to stay on the field for 16 games, this is going to be a team that is able to get the job done, and you can expect a lot more from this team if he's able to stay healthy, as well as the rest of the group, as that offensive line is going to have to, if they're going to keep Locke upright, so that they can get the job done offensively. Reason number 5 has to be how competitive they were, and the games that they lost were truly heartbreaking. You saw the team lose to 3 game-winning field goals. I mean, it doesn't get much unluckier than that. First started against the Chicago Bears in a game where, you're seeing a Bears kicker kick the game-winning field goal. That was Eddie Pinheiro, who came in for the kick, but it's what led to that that has fans so frustrated. That was the fact that there was a roughing the passer call on a hit that hit Mitch Trubisky, and that got them down the field. And then there was also a clock issue where fans thought the clock should have hit 0 before they were able to spike it to have time to kick the field goal, but they had 1 second remaining, and the Bears were able to capitalize. So that was the first time losing like that. The next time was the Jacksonville Jaguars in a game that they were up 17-3 in. They found ways to let the Jaguars and Gardner Minshew, who may have had a career best as far as the plays that he were making to get the Jags back into that game, but they were able to crawl back in it, and all of a sudden Denver was not able to get it done, but they were able to keep it in position to where they could win the game. But Jacksonville got down the field, and they had a chip shot field goal walk-off victory against the Broncos. And then the next one, which, you could argue for the reasons that it happened, was the most frustrating one for fans, is the one against the Colts, where it was the final drive by Jacoby Brissett to get the team all the way down into field goal position for Adam Vinatieri to close out the game and show he has ice in his veins still. But it's what led up to that, and that was the fact that Von Miller had Brissett in his grasp in the end zone for what would have been the game-sealing safety. Essentially, they would have got the ball back, the 2 points, of course, and they would have been able to just simply take a knee, and the game would have been over. But he slipped out of his grasp, and of all players to allow something like that, you would never think a player of Von Miller's caliber would be the one to do it. But sure enough, the Colts got down the field, and they were able to capitalize when Vinatieri kicked a 51-yard game winner. Very impressive for a guy who has been in the league for as long as he has, and he showed that he still had it. But the point of this is, the Denver Broncos found ways to lose games they should not have. Another game that comes to mind is the Vikings game. They were on the road, and with quarterback and backup Brandon Allen, they went up 20-0 against a playoff caliber team, and they found a way to lose that game in dramatic fashion near the end of the game, where there was a call that maybe could have gone the Broncos' way with the pass to Noah Fant in the back of the end zone, but it did not, and the team did blow that lead. This is, as bad as it was, as frustrating as it was for fans, it showed good signs, though, because the team barely lost games and lost them in ways that they really shouldn't have. Some ways were out of their control, and I think that shows a lot, because if those games go differently, then you're looking at a team that could have been 10-6, maybe 11-5. So as much of a stretch as that can be, because all teams are going to face adversity here and there, and things are going to happen that are out of teams' controls. It was just one of those things where, had it gone differently, would have been a very different scenario. So for that reason, going into the season, this is a team that you should expect to compete at a high level, and I think it's just as simple as that. There you have it. Those are the 5 reasons right there as to why the Denver Broncos will make the playoffs in the upcoming season. And I didn't mention it, but of course there was the new CBA approval that changed the playoff format, so there will be a 7th team in both the AFC and NFC playoff picture, and that only gives a little bit more leeway to a team like the Broncos, who are one of those fringe teams who will most likely try and secure a wild card spot most realistically. And I haven't even gotten into the draft. Of course, that hasn't occurred yet. It is still set for April 23rd through 25th. There haven't been any changes so far as postponing it. There's a lot of GMs around the league that are considering it. John Elway is actually one of those. He says that he'd prefer it, but they're ready nonetheless. They're prepared to make the selections that they need to improve their team and elevate them to that playoff caliber team, which I think that they will be able to do with the remaining positions that they need to fill. So there you have it. Expect this team to be the biggest sleeper in the NFL.
Thanks for watching. For more sports-related content, make sure to always come on over to Beyond the Sport here on YouTube, and make sure to follow us at Beyond the Sport on Instagram.